Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kate, and I thought today I would do my January wrap up for you. So I read a total of 6 things, and I had one book that I DNF'd, so 7 books here to show you today. So I'll just get right into it. The first book I read was actually a graphic novel, and this was the first thing I read this year, and that was Low, Volume 2 by Rick Remender. I really enjoyed the first volume. This one I only gave 3 out of 5 stars. It was still okay, it was enjoyable. I still really liked the artwork, but I just didn't feel like the story advanced very much. I don't think it added a whole lot to the plot. The first volume was a lot longer, first of all, and it also seemed to span, like, a lot more happened in the story, but this one was very compact, didn't span a lot of time, and not a whole lot happened. So we'll see. I'll pick up the next one still, but I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to continue after the 3rd volume. We'll see whether or not I still enjoy it. And then the next book I read in January was the first novel I read this year, and that was My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. I did a full review, which I'll link down below, and really it's more of like a rave about how much I loved this book and I loved Daphne du Maurier rather than an actual review, but I do talk a little bit about how it's a gothic novel, and I'll link that down below so you can see my full review, but I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. And then the next book I read was nonfiction, I guess, but it was a collection of book reviews, which I mentioned in a couple videos before this one, and that is 10 Years in the Tub, A Decade Soaking in Great Books by Nick Hornby. So this is just a decade's worth of his book reviews from the Believer magazine. I loved this. He's such a great writer. He's so funny. I've never read any of his fiction before. I've seen a couple of movies that are based on his books and I really enjoyed them, but I never picked up any of his stuff. But reading this made me really want to pick up his fiction because he's such a great writer. It was interesting because I don't think I have very similar reading tastes to Nick Hornby, but that didn't make me not want to read his reviews of the books, even though I maybe wasn't necessarily particularly interested in them. So this is 10 years worth of books, and if you can see, I tabbed here. I think there was 5 or 6 books that I wanted to read based on his reviews, and maybe 8 that I had already read. So out of 10 years worth of books, that's not a lot to have in common with somebody, but still want to read every review that they wrote. So I think that's a testament to how great of a writer he is and how funny he is. And like I mentioned before, he doesn't talk so much in terms of like plot or actually technically reviewing the books that he read. It's more a matter of him talking about why he picked up the books he did and what was going on in his life at the time, to explain why he read what he did and why maybe he didn't read as much as he wanted to. And I thought that was a really interesting way of reviewing books. So I think that's part of the reason why I enjoyed this one so much. And I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was a short story collection that I read for my book club this month, and that was Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is a collection of short stories that are all centered around love and relationships. It was good. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it about 3 or 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't read a ton of short story collections, so I wasn't entirely sure how to rate it, really. There was a few stories that I really liked, but other than that, they were just kind of okay for me. The first story in the book was my favorite, I think. And that was about a couple who's kind of falling out of love. It's very relatable. But other than that, other than being love stories, they all have to do with, I guess, kind of an Indian diaspora. So it's people who have immigrated from India to North America usually. I think there's a couple that are set in India, maybe in Europe somewhere, in the UK maybe. But they're all Indian couples, all based on love stories. So I'd recommend this one. It was a really good read. It's a good short story collection. If you like books about relationships and love that aren't necessarily like your standard like romance novel, this is definitely a good read. I'd suggest this one. The next book I picked up was The Dumb House by John Burnside, and I absolutely loved this one. It's about a man who's told the story of the dumb house by his mother when he was a young boy, about an experiment that was done on kids to raise them in absolute silence, to see like what language they develop and whether or not language is innate. And he kind of has this interesting idea that language is I guess part of the soul, or the soul resides in our like ability to speak. And so it's kind of, and then he goes on to kind of recreate the experiment on his own children. So it's really kind of dark and gruesome. He has a really bizarre view of the world and women, and yeah, it's very sexually explicit at some points. So I did really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend it, but if you maybe don't have a strong stomach, it's maybe not the best book. But yeah, it's very enjoyable. I think I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And then the next book I picked up was actually the book that I didn't finish. And this one, I don't know. I kind of went into it knowing that I probably wasn't going to enjoy it so much. I got it as a Christmas gift a few years ago when it was making the rounds on YouTube, on BookTube. It was a really popular YA book. That's 172 Hours on the Moon by Johan Harstad. Yeah, I only got, I got 26 pages in and I had to put it down. I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like it just seemed very juvenile. I mean, obviously it's a YA and I understand that, but the premise was a little bit ridiculous. NASA holds a lottery to send 3 teenagers to the moon in order to get publicity and funding for these experiments that they want to do. I didn't like the one character, like the one teenage character that I got to meet. I absolutely did not like. I thought she was not written well at all in the one chapter that I read. She was whiny. I just didn't want to deal with that through the entire book. I ended up going online and just figuring out and finding out like what the twist was and what was on the moon that was so awful, just so that I wouldn't have to force myself to read it all. And I wanted to know if it was going to be worth my time to actually try and read it. But I wasn't too happy with what I found out was going to be the ending to this book, so I didn't even want to read how they got to that point. So I think it's probably good for a lot of younger readers. It's probably super fast paced. I think it has a little bit of romance to it, science fiction, horror. It's probably a fun read for younger readers, but if you're older and you don't generally like YA like myself, I wouldn't recommend it. Obviously I didn't give it a star rating as I barely even got into it at all, but this is just a DNF for me. And the last book that I read this month was When Jack by Joseph Boyden. This is just a tiny little, 100-page short little story about a Aboriginal boy who runs away from a residential school. It's really good, super short, quick, easy read. I'd highly recommend it. I know there's kind of a little bit of controversy around Joseph Boyden right now in terms of his Aboriginal descent and also that UBC letter that he wrote, but I don't think that should exclude him from being able to write these kinds of books or important literature. So I enjoyed it for what it was, and I'd recommend it. Yeah, so anyways, that was it for January, and I'll see you all in my next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a good week, guys. Bye.